You wouldn't believe it if I told you. But the school I thought I knew where I'd spent every day since I was little was hiding something much darker beneath its familiar walls I never imagined. A place meant for learning could become the setting of a secret. I'd never be able to forget it all started like any other day, but one moment changed everything. He was just the principal, the person who ran the school. But what happened between us was something that nobody would have ever guessed it was. Our secret, hidden in plain sight. And now, I can't unsee the truth. My name is Ava, and I'm 18 years old. It's not easy form to talk about this, but sometimes sharing a story can help make sense of things. And maybe it can even help someone else in the process. What happened to me started like any normal day at school, but by the end of it, everything had completely changed. I never expected it to go the way it did, and even now it's hard to fully understand. But I need to share the truth, even if it's difficult. Torliv. It all started with a seemingly small moment, a conversation, a glance, or an unexpected action. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was nothing more than a random exchange. But as days went by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. It was subtle at first, a lingering look, a question that felt just a bit too personal. I remember the first time he spoke to me outside of the usual formal interactions. The principal, Mr. Carter, had always been kind but distant, as you'd expect, but that day was different. His tone was softer almost. Concerned. I didn't think much of it, but it stuck with me the next time we crossed paths. He asked how I was really doing, and for a second it felt like I was talking to someone who understood me. Better than anyone else. I didn't know why, but I felt myself opening up, revealing more than I usually would after that. I couldn't look at him, the same way the atmosphere at school began to shift, and I felt it. It wasn't just him. It was how everything felt heavier, how my interactions with him became charged in a way that I couldn't explain. I found myself overthinking every word he said, every look he gave. I had to decide if I should back away or lean in closer. But when you start questioning yourself, when you feel like you're walking on a thin line, it's hard to make a clear decision. I thought I was just imagining things, but deep down, I knew something was different. Something was happening, and I was scared. I couldn't stop it. I tried to carry on as if nothing had happened, but every little thing felt different. Conversations felt heavier, interactions more charged. And I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way Mr. Carter would look at me just a bit longer than necessary made my heart race. Softening of his voice. Even the small compliments he'd throw my way when I did something right. All started to feel like a weight I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't like this before. I'd always respected him, but now I felt something else. It was subtle, but undeniable. I remember the first time I had to go into his office for a meeting. My palms were sweating as I walked through the door. He greeted me with that same calm smile, but it didn't feel the same. I could feel the tension in the room, like there was something unsaid hanging in the air. I tried to brush it off, act like everything was normal, but it wasn't. Every word he spoke felt like it carried a hidden meaning, and I found myself struggling to keep my composure. The worst part, I couldn't tell anyone how. No one would believe me if I said something was off. I had no proof, just a growing sense that something was wrong. I wanted to pretend it was all in my head, but I couldn't ignore it. I knew I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine, but confronting it, facing whatever was happening, was even harder. It felt like I was stuck in a situation I didn't understand, too scared to pull away yet, too unsure to move forward. Then came the moment I couldn't avoid, a conversation that changed everything. It wasn't planned, it wasn't something I expected, but one afternoon, after school, Mr. Carter asked me to stay behind in his office. My heart skipped a beat as I walked in. But this time, something in his eyes was different. He wasn't just being polite anymore. There was an intensity, a heaviness in the air that I couldn't shake. He told me he'd noticed how I'd been struggling lately, how distant I seemed, and I thought I would melt into the floor right then. And there, I didn't know what to say. It was like he was reading me, and for the first time I felt like I was being seen in a way I didn't want. That was when it happened. His hand brushed against Minias. He handed me a piece of paper, a simple gesture, but it sent a shockwave through my body. I froze. His eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, Everything I had been avoiding crashed into my mind. I had told myself, was this something real? Was there something between us? Or was I just imagining it? All the words hung in the air, unsaid but so loud in my head, and that was when it hit me. I was no longer in control. This wasn't something I could pretend wasn't happening. The tension had reached its peak. I was left with a choice: take the easier path and ignore it, pretend it didn't matter, or face the truth and deal with the consequences. No matter how hard it might be, after a lot of reflection and difficult conversations, I finally found clarity. It wasn't the resolution I had imagined, but it was what needed to happen. I spent days thinking about what had happened, trying to piece together my feelings and asking myself whether I was just caught in a moment or if this was something more. It wasn't easy, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal. Eventually, I decided I needed to speak to someone. I reached out to a close friend, someone I trusted. It wasn't easy to open up, but when I did, it felt like a weight had been lifted. She listened without judgment and reminded me of something I'd forgotten: that I deserved respect and boundaries. It was a hard truth to face, but I understood then that I had let things go too far without realizing the consequences. The most difficult part came when I finally confronted Mr. Carter. It wasn't a dramatic showdown, but it was real. I told him how his actions had made him feel, how everything had changed because of his behavior. There were no excuses, no more pretending. He apologized, but I knew that I had to walk away from this situation, no matter how complicated it was. The journey taught me a lot about boundaries, self-awareness, and what it means to take control of your own life. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't easy, but it was real. I learned that sometimes facing uncomfortable truths is the only way to truly move forward. And while the experience left scars, it also gave me strength and understanding that I'll carry with me looking back. This experience reminded me of something important. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the most growth. I never imagined I'd be put in a situation like this, but it taught me that it's not always about finding the perfect answer. It's about staying true to yourself, setting boundaries, and doing what's right. Even when it's hard, life isn't always black and white, but the strength to face uncomfortable truths can make all the difference in how we move forward.